This is Graciously Grieving, Living Through the Pain podcast. I'm your host, Ricky Cunningham. On today's episode, we'll be going over the Q&A and poll questions from the first two episodes. So in a sense, if you answered these questions, you are my co-host for today. Let's get started. The first section of comments will come from Facebook. Angela Grant said, Sister Cunningham, I just listened to your podcast, and it's therapeutic. You had some great, helpful hints on how to deal with grief. Keep up the great work, and I'm looking forward to listening to the next one. Well, thank you, Sister Grant, for your comments. That was my aim, to have the podcast be therapeutic in nature. Sometimes people are unaware of what they are feeling or how to even deal with the emotions they have. So I want this podcast to be a safe place to come and listen for helpful and hopeful hints to help the process of grief. To identify the things that might trigger the emotions, so instead of them becoming stumbling blocks, they will be stepping stones to healing. Wendy Booty Manning said, Good morning. Just listen to the podcast and all I can say is very relatable, especially becoming overcome with grief and you become angry. Looking forward to listening to Remembering and Honoring Our Loved Ones. Great job. Well, Wendy, I thank you for your support and your feedback. You said you found it relatable about being overcome with grief and you become angry. Anger is one of the stages of grief. Dr. Clinton and Dr. Hawkins says, often anger is released towards others and towards God. Grieving people become preoccupied with memories of what has been lost and may withdraw for a time. I believe that the anger is sometimes wrapped around with a little guilt as well. I know it was for me. I was angry with myself for not going to New Jersey sooner to get my sister, or I said I should have called the state services more to get her benefits, or I should have held on to her hand a little longer instead of letting go. We hit the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, and we analyze every detail, but we have to let go and trust God. The answers of the why might not be ours to have on this side of heaven. We have to trust God in His infinite wisdom. Lamentations 3:32 says, Though He brings grief, He also shows compassion because of the greatness of His unfailing love. Detosha Cox Simon says, I really enjoyed your podcast. You gave some valuable info and gems to use while grieving. Great job. FYI, I did not know James had passed away in good times. Thank you for your comments and support, sweetie. And yes, James passed away on the show. And we discussed how Florida was trying to avoid the pain until the waves finally came crushing in. I'm glad you found some valuable info and useful gems to help through the process. I believe it is important that we help each other when we are struggling with the process of grief. It is about community and unity, because if I'm hurting and not functioning at my best, that decreases my effectiveness and presence, both body and mind, to do anything. Everything that we do will be limited if we continue to suppress the grief we are feeling, and it can develop into prolonged grief disorder. Unaddressed grief can affect us mentally, physically, and spiritually. It does have the potential to alter many factors of our lives. This is why it's important for us to develop coping skills and a good support group. While all the listeners of Graciously Grieving hold a special place in my heart, this gracious gem is my queen and top supporter. My mother, Annie Horton Randall, says, I just enjoyed the podcast. The tears came flowing down. I really enjoyed the message. Very good. Now, y'all might be saying, that's your mother. Of course she is going to say something nice. Well, my mother is very honest and does not sugarcoat how she is feeling or what she thinks. She would not hesitate to say Kelly, because that's what she calls me. that is not it. You need to do this, this, and this. And me being the doting daughter that I am, I would say, yes, ma'am, and carry on smartly. And yes, chances are, knowing that she is absolutely right in the changes she's telling me to make. So it does mean a lot what she has to say and what all of you say. That's why it is important to keep the feedback coming. Let me know what is on your mind, what you find useful, and what you think should be put on the back burner. While it might be my voice you hear, the show is ours together. Together we will bridge the gap from hurting to healing and healing to hopeful for better days. The next couple of comments come from the text line. If you would like to leave a message, you can do so at 430-808-1225. Our first message says, "Good evening. This is L. Harris. I just finished listening to your first 2 episodes of Graciously Grieving. This conversation is much needed in our culture. I really enjoyed the conversation with Morgan. It's important that everyone is able to work through their grief in their own way. This is some good information. I'm following your channel to hear more. Thank you." Thank you for your kind comment, Sister Harris, and for your support. You mentioned how this conversation is much needed in culture. Yes, indeed. Too often we shy away from talking about grief because it is a difficult conversation to have with someone. But that is what we have to do. We have to be deliberate and intentional in making sure those who have experienced a traumatic event have our support. Because we do not want to later say, "I wished I would have talked to them or intervened somehow." We have been made to believe that we always have to be strong, but we do not. That is putting too much pressure on ourselves. I pray that people will find something said in these episodes as helpful. It is time to break barriers and stop suffering in silence. It is a phrase that has become trending, but we need to understand that it is true when we say it's okay not to be okay. I said in the first episode, if you need extra tissue, I got you. The spoon to eat some Ben and Jerry's, come on, I got you. Even though I'm a Haagen-Dazs, rum raisin kind of girl, I will bring you a spoon. I will sit with you while you do the ugly cry in the bucket of Ben and Jerry. We have to be available for people when they are in need and stop sidestepping what they are trying to tell us about what they're feeling because we're too busy and do not have time to get involved. We bypass their feelings to what we deem as a more acceptable conversation. It's time to have the hard conversations, the awkward conversations that move us out our comfort zone. Our next comment, it says, "Good evening. I listened to your podcast. My grief isn't the loss of a loved one, but I do have sadness and heartache due to situations that have happened in my life. I suffer with anxiety and depression because of those experiences. I said that to say, although my grief is different, I can definitely take from this podcast. Relate, release, then relax. I love it. I have to often tell myself one moment, one day at a time, because it gets hard at times. Also, the comment you made about having someone to talk to, it's hard being the strong one, but like you said, give it all to God. Thank you." This is Tiny, by the way. Well, thank you, Tiny, for your comments and support. I'm sorry to hear that you suffer from anxiety and depression. It is certainly understandable how it can happen. I'm not going to say that I know how you feel, because I do not. Whatever has caused your anxiety and depression is different from what caused my anxiety and depression. People sometimes say with good intentions that they know how someone is feeling, but we don't. And then you also talked about how your grief is different. And that is true. Grief is not a one size fits all. Grief is different for everyone. Each person will have a unique experience. Each loss will have a unique impact. Even if our loss of a loved one happened at the same time in the same event, it is our different relationships with our loved ones that will set the tone for how we grieve. Your relationship with your loved one could have been peaches and cream, whereas mine was rocky and distant at best. So the strength and the closeness of that relationship contributes to the impact of that grief. Also, an interesting thing is that we should always keep in mind too is grief not only comes from the death of someone, but it can come from the loss of anything that we have love for, and now that impact of the absent has left an emptiness that we do not yet know how to come to terms with. But through friends, family, and outside sources, we will work at it and we will work through it. The next comments come from Spotify. Morgan Horton says, "This episode was an honor for me to be a part of. Getting to share my memories of her brought joy to my heart. Thank you, Mommy. Your work is a blessing to our family and to others." Morgan, it was an honor to have you on with me. I look forward to having you back on future episodes. I wanted to do that episode to remember my sister in a special way. There were just too many milestones to do nothing. So I set the podcast to launch on 9/23/23 at 9:23 a.m. And it launched shortly before the balloon release our family did at the cemetery to mark her 60th birthday. We have to do things to remember our loved ones. For instance, if on their birthday they used to love going Outback, make that a new tradition for your family to honor your loved one and go to Outback. Or if they love doing 5-mile nature hikes on their birthday, do that. Find whatever it is that works for you and your family. And if while it doing so, the tears start to fall, then let them fall. It will show your love for them in liquid form. And a good liquid form it will be. The next comment comes from HamDog75. Outstanding. This is one of my other great supporters, and he better be because we share the same last name. But no, seriously, thank you, Antoine. I thank him so much for all of his support, staying up late with me, doing homework while I do homework while he's just sitting there. Because I'm currently in school for pastoral counseling, for him settling for sandwiches for dinner or having to cook dinner, go back to his Navy skills and cook dinner for us. But he does that because he is such a great support. So I love you, babe. Thank you. And then Monique Brown says, "Definitely needed. I deal with this on a daily, trying to fight and find a way to get out. This gives me more insight on how to breathe and let go and let God." Thank you for supporting in your comments. As long as God keeps telling me to keep pressing on, I will do my best to keep passing on what I learned to be a help to others who are searching for answers and want the healing process to continue, or you might be at a spot where you just need the healing process to start. So I hope that this podcast will be a source of helpful information for everyone that listens. Now we're going to go to the poll results. One of the questions I asked was, who is your go-to person to talk to about your grief? 50% said friend or family member, and pastor and professional counselor tied for 25%. No one said a stranger or a support group. It was kind of surprising because sometimes we do feel free to tell a stranger how we are truly feeling because we don't want to burden our loved ones, or we just feel just a little more comfortable, as odd as that sounds, to talk to someone that may not be as judgmental as our family or friends. Also, it surprised me because Stranger also covered support groups. One of my classmates told me about a group they have at the church where he attends called Grief Share. Now, I'm not sure if it's national, but when you get a chance, Google it and find a group in your local area. I know I did. And it is some level of freedom to let down the mask and reveal how you truly feel. However, after a while, they will become friends and maybe family, because relationships and bonds will occur. But it is another outlet, some source of releasing what we have inside, so it doesn't stay pent up. In a book that I'm reading titled Healing for the Hopeful Heart, it is about true stories of God's mysterious ways. And one of the stories in the book was about this woman whose daughter was killed by a drunk driver. She talks about how her pain was so excruciating that no one could get through to her, not her family, her friends, or pastor. She said God used a stranger through social media to talk to her in love to break the barriers. Don't tell me what God can't do. A stranger through social media, being obedient to God, spoke the words that would pierce her heart and call for a change. She said she was close to a divorce. The other thing I like about this book is that it gives you a be encouraged note at the end of their story. Hers was, God loved me enough to have a perfect stranger use social media to speak into the very depths of my heart and heal wounds. What he did for me, he can do for you as well. This is so true. He loves all his children, and all we have to do is call out, and he will hear our plea. Isaiah 65:24 says, I will answer them before they even call to me. While they are still talking about their needs, I will go ahead and answer their prayers. I'm telling you now to try him. He is faithful. But there are other options also. If you don't feel like you can go and talk to your pastor, talk to strangers, talk to whoever. But if you need an outlet to talk, there's a number that you can text, 988, and they're there 24 hours. Now it says Suicide Crisis Lifeline, but I'm not saying you're suicidal. And I pray to God that you're not, but if you are, use that number and call them. They do a lot of talking about a variety of subjects. They talk about grief. They talk about bullying. It's a whole bunch of things that they talk about. But they are available 24/7 for you if you want somebody to talk to. And then there's the crisis text line. You can text 741-741. And they'll be there to help you as well. And Hey Sam, for young people up to 24 years old, they can text 438-726. They have limited hours. They are only available from 8 to 8. And then my other question was, where are you most likely to listen to a podcast episode? At home and during your commute was a 50-50 split. So with that being said, I want to respect your time because I know it is valuable and you could be doing so many other things. I will do my best to keep the episodes between 15 to 25 minutes unless a topic needs more in-depth discussion, or more importantly, if God says so. And so with that being said, let us go to God in prayer. Dear Lord, I thank you for those who took the time to listen to the podcast and leave such beautiful, encouraging words. Lord, as we continue the journey of healing together, give us the courage and strength to be truthful and open about what we're feeling. And let us show one another compassion as you mend our broken hearts. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, my gracious gems, that's our time for today. Please leave your thoughts or comments on the show through the method you used through Spotify, or send a text message to 430-808-1225, or email to Ricky, RIKKI, at graciouslygrievinglttp.com. Next week, we will talk about refocusing in the meantime. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Ricky Cunningham.